In 2013, this book was published by a relatively unknown Dutch author in his native language. In 2016, it was translated and released in English. But only after Stephen King tweeted about it did this book achieve what you can only call viral fame. It went to the top of everybody's TBR pile quickly. And when PS Publishing announced they had signed trade editions, on a whim, I grabbed it. So in 2017, I bought this book, read it, loved it, wondered why I'd never heard of this author before, and wondered why a limited edition was never made of this book. And every time Suntup released a survey about what books they wanted to see, what books the customers wanted to see published, Hex was always on that list, a very short list, because it made quite an impact. It's like a completely original lost classic Stephen King story. That's not to say it's a copycat or doesn't have its own merits. It's definitely a brilliant work by a brilliant author who we all should be taking note of. So when Suntup announced they were doing this as a signed limited edition, I was over the moon, thrilled that I would have a copy that that contained art to complement the book that was so worthy and so deserving, and just quite frankly a shock that nobody else had picked it up by then. And then when Paul gave me Tomas's email to call him and do an interview, I was dumbstruck. So what you're going to have here is my interview with Tomas Olde Heuvelt. He gives me a lesson on how to say his name, and I fail every time. The book is brilliant. Tomas is awesome. And in this interview, we talk about this book, what's going on with the television series, and what's next. And believe you me, there's plenty more from this author that I will be reading, and hopefully you will too. So watch the interview, enjoy, and get the Suntup book.
For once, I'm not talking to myself. It's time to go beyond the book and get over your shelf.
So thank you so much for joining us. I think the fans love to hear. I do. So I approach this as a fan, as a collector, as someone who's read your book. That's going to be redone here shortly as a limited edition. So the fans love to hear this. I think it adds to some depth of understanding what went into it. You know,
Right.
and readers, they're very curious people. So
I'm very happy to tell about the story.
yeah. So what inspired Hex? Where did the book begin for you? When did you know you had this story to tell?
From a very early age on, I had an uncle who told me the kind of bedtime stories that were kind of suitable for kids, but not really, like Roald Dahl kind of stories, you know, with this mean kind of humor and mean kind of horror in it. And when I was very young, I think I was 7 years old. I'm from the Netherlands, and I live in the eastern part of the Netherlands, and my uncle lived in Amsterdam, and my sister and I used to go over for sleepovers for the weekend. And so my sister and I lay in the big bed, and he was on the side of the bed in the dark, telling us horror stories for bedtime, basically. He told me Bram Stoker's Dracula that way, and
Oh, wow.
the entire Lord of the Rings saga and all that
So
stuff.
how old were you?
Well, Dracula, I think I was 8.
Oh,
But
wow.
when he told me The Witches by Roald Dahl, I was 7.
Wow.
And I don't know if you know The Witches by Roald Dahl. It's a fantastic children's novel, made into a fantastic movie with Angelica Huston as well. And he did it in the same way Netflix tells stories nowadays, with installments and with cliffhangers and all that stuff. And he cut out at the scary part, and then I lay in the dark, you know, with eyes wide open, paralyzed.
Yeah.
And the witches in Roald Dahl's stories, in Roald Dahl's story, they look like regular women, but they are not because they wear wigs, because they have bald, rotten heads and they have claws, so they wear gloves. And it was winter in Amsterdam when he told me that story, and women on the street were wearing gloves. So I trusted no one anymore.
Yeah, that's funny.
And then he also used to take me to the woods near where I live, because the place in the Netherlands where I live is very wooded. And whenever we would come across a fairy ring on the trail, there's a ring of toadstools. He used to say, that's where witches have danced this night, and you have to walk past it with your eyes closed, because otherwise you get 7 years of bad luck. And I was 7 years old, and I believed him because I believed everything I was told.
Yeah.
So ever since, I've been walking past fairy rings with my eyes closed. Even now I don't believe in witches anymore. But he traumatized me in a good way. And from back then, I knew I have to write a book about a witch one day in the Netherlands, when none of this stuff ever happens, of course. And I said it in the exact region where he took me hiking in the woods.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is what struck me, and I obviously read the English translation. But what struck me with this book was that at first I did not see the witch as a malevolent. She was a victim. She was the town's victim, and so I didn't get the sense of fear from her and this look out from her. Is that what you intended when you wrote it? Like, did you want to make her see? Yeah.
People are a lot scarier usually, and this book is more about human evil than it is about supernatural evil. I mean, what's funny is now that the book's been out for, I think, 6 years, and it's been out worldwide now, so I get messages from all around the world from readers who've read the book, and they're all scared by the same thing. Apparently, universally, whether we're from India or Argentina or from Alaska, or from New Zealand or from Japan, people are generally afraid by that figure that stands in your bedroom at night when you wake up and you see that shape staring at you behind those stitched up eyes. It's that image of the witch, of that supernatural presence invading your life that freaks people out. But once you get deeper into the book, you start realizing that's not where the real scary part is.
Yes.
Because indeed, Catherine was basically a misunderstood mother. And it's the fear that people have for her that create the bad and the situation in the book, the evil in the book.
Well, what struck me, what I really walked away from the book with, was what I loved about it was how everybody had this crazy supernatural element, but they tried to live their everyday around it. Like, all right, should we have kids? Should we move to this town? And for the teenagers, it's claustrophobia, even though they have the whole town to explore. Like, I need to get out. And the app to track her is just like, all right, well, some parts of the world have hurricanes and tornadoes. We have a witch.
Yeah.
and that said a lot to me about, like, humans. You're right. So, like, we're dealing with everyday evil, but we've adapted to it, or it's become sort of commonplace.
People can get used to everything. I always tend to think that this is the Dutch part of the book. Like I said, I'm from the Netherlands, and people in the Netherlands are very down-to-earth people. I was raised in a very down-to-earth, matter-of-fact way. Religion doesn't play a huge part in our lives anymore. We're very secular as a community, basically, and very down-to-earth. And I always tend to think that, whenever a supernatural figure with eyes stitched up appears in your bedroom, sane people run and scream. Dutch people just hang a dishcloth over her face and read the paper. And so that it's a very humorous part of the book, I think, that hands-on dealing with the supernatural, the very practical way of dealing with the supernatural. That's part of my Dutchness, and also part of the way I was raised. My mom is very practical. She always makes lists of everything, you know, when you go on vacation, okay, you make a full list of things you need to pack and you just strike it through, and it's very practical. That seemed like a fun way to deal with the supernatural as well, because I'd never seen that before.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and I think that's the one thing when she's introduced, it's sort of like she's there, she's almost a piece of furniture,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
the reader can't help but be creeped out. Like you said, a sane person's like, what, you know, she just pops into your house, she just makes the rounds and she keeps watching everybody. Um, and so through that, we become residents of the town. We become
Like that
somebody's,
opening scene
yeah,
where she just pops up in the main protagonist's house, you know, stands in a corner while the family is, you know, pleasantly eating Chinese takeout. You
right,
know, and
right.
then you get the sense of what the hell is going on. You know, don't they see her? Aren't they freaked out by it? No, they're not, because they're used to it.
And so with that initial scare and introduction, then we move into like, how does the town deal with it? And I know, you know, with the app, it's so interesting because 2007, this thing came on the scene and changed everything about
Yeah.
how humans interact. And so it plays a role in the book, but like if you had to update it today, would it change at all? Would you, because it seems like people have been almost like this is the greater evil than anything.
Well,
You know,
I heard a couple of horror authors argue a while ago that, you know, and indeed, you know, our cell phones is basic means the end of horror fiction as we know it, because
ah,
the old ways of telling stories with people in isolation, not being able to reach out, you can't do that anymore. But I don't think like that. I think, you know, use everyday life at your advantage, you know. So I think, yeah, of course, if you have a real town nowadays that's haunted by the supernatural presence, of course we'd have an app where we track her. My main problem had more to
right,
do with social media, because the towns, especially the conservative, the town body, the council, they want to keep it a secret, and that is hard with social media. So they needed to come up with a way to block most social networks and other websites where you can reach out and check everyone's phones. Like it's basically like, you know, it's interesting. When the book came out in China, um, Chinese readers told me that they could relate to the story very well, because they had the sense that they live in an everyday black spring, because their government blocks their
wow,
social media, and they said that they, you know, they check what they write, and there are certain topics you cannot write about. So that had a very eerie sense to them, but very
wow.
relatable for them. That's something that I didn't think of beforehand, but that was an interesting take on the story from a different culture.
Right. I hadn't considered that either about um, how about messaging control and trying to keep
Yeah.
things, because it's like the council is of course trying to protect the town, obviously. Um, but it's also trying to protect visitors from coming into town and being seen by her,
Yeah.
and becoming resident. How was it envisioning this whole town? Was it because what I'm amazed by is you're approaching this this supernatural element, this witch, from so many different perspectives. How would the town react? How would individuals react? How would the youth react? Was that a big challenge?
Yeah, it was. My main challenge was, how do I portray this entire town without taking on too many viewpoint characters?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For instance, I love Stephen King's small town novels, but sometimes they have so many viewpoint characters that you spend very little time with each character, and therefore you don't bond with them too much.
Right.
So I chose just 4 viewpoint characters through whose eyes you would kind of get the sense of the whole town.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at everyday life. There's, of course, there's an older conservative body, and there's the young kids who are idealistic and want to go out with the haunting. And you know, Tyler, the 17-year-old kid in the book, he wants to get, you know, National Geographic involved to make a documentary about the witch in order to set the town free. That's another way of approaching it. And
Right.
maybe you would have succeeded better. But who knows? It never happened that way, unfortunately.
Right.
But
Yeah, yeah. So when you moved it to the English translation, you moved the whole setting.
yes.
So talk a little bit about that. What were your thoughts about, I need to put this in the United States?
Yeah, so the original book sets in the Netherlands, near where I live. And, you know, the reactions that I got from readers is that they were generally creeped out by the book. And I like that. I like getting messages from readers who say, you know, I had to sleep with the lights on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a job well done, basically, for me. So I figured in any genre, in any literary genre, exploring new worlds, exploring new cultures, new places is interesting, and it's a good thing. Horror genre is the only genre that in its name has the emotion, right? It's an emotion, it's horror, it's fear.
Mm-hmm. Hey, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I wanted to get that gut punch reaction from readers in the United States as well, that they were generally scared by it. And in order to really scare people, in my eyes, you need to create a perfect sense of familiarity by which you lure the reader slowly in. And then you rip it apart and you grab them by the throat, basically. But you need to have that sense of familiarity first. And I felt that if American readers and readers around the world who don't know Dutch culture very well, and even though we kind of look like American culture, we're still very different in subtle but important ways. You get a rational response. You'd be wondering, okay, well, first, how do you pronounce these people's names? How do you, what is the norm for these people? What are they afraid of and what are they not afraid of? That might be a little bit different than you're used to yourself. And I felt that rational response would get in the way of that gut punch reaction of fear. So that's why I decided, I might as well just change the location. And so I did. I chose the Hudson Valley, basically the breeding ground for the Gothic novel. I studied American literature at university, so I'm well embedded in American literature and in the breakthrough of Gothic genre. It's interesting that after the rights for Hex were sold to the United States, they were sold to 25 more countries. And each and every of them, we offered both the Dutch version of the book and the American version of the book. And all of them, including Germany and France, nearby countries here in the Netherlands, all of them chose the American version. That tells you something about how pop culture works.
Right. So what did you take from that? Did you take it as it was more relatable, or because America exports so much image?
Yeah, it's just pop culture. We all know horror movies, we all know the Stephen King novels,
Right.
That kind of stuff sets in America, basically. That's the sense that people get from that. And then even though that's not always true, like my new novel, Echo, that will be out in February in the United States, that sets a very small part in the United States, but mostly in Europe. And for that book, it has a very international setting with Amsterdam and the Swiss Alps and all that. So it didn't matter too much. But yeah, that's how pop culture works.
There are so many people who try to imitate Stephen King, getting back to your idea of a town. There's so many that there's one author I'm not going to name, but this author was touted as another Stephen King, and a lot of people ding this author because this author was too, they felt she was taking plot lines right from Stephen King. And I didn't find that as a problem at all. I think art fuels other arts, and
Sure.
we can't help but create it. But what you've done, in my opinion, because I am a lifelong Stephen King reader, you created something totally original that might tap into that sort of vein, but it's totally different. And I think it works. It gets to the same emotions. It gets to the same ordinary and extraordinary balance, but in a totally new way. That's why I absolutely loved it. And in fact, when I read Tommyknockers recently, I thought, wow, this was, I read it before, obviously, I read it when I was 15, so well before Hex was published. But I recently read it because PS did an edition, so I read that one. Yeah, it's beautiful. So when I read that, I'm like, oh, this is kind of similar, where there's a poison literally over the town, and I felt, but to your point, I think Stephen King did spread himself too thin with so many characters in that book. So I see that, but
was very high in a lot of stuff when he wrote that.
Yeah, that's the
Still a great book, by the way.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, it's awesome when people compare my work to his. And for me personally, because I grew up with his work, I mean, the Netherlands doesn't have a tradition of horror fiction, not at all. Our literature is very well. I think if you look at history, the Dutch are very Calvinistic in nature, very, well, we believe what we see and very practical. If a country is shaped by people coming to this new continent full of dangers and full of, fearing the devil and fearing the indigenous people who live there and fearing wild beasts, and you get a different kind of storytelling because fear is embedded in that culture. American literature, I studied American literature, is by nature much more plot driven than Dutch literature. So when I was young, the only horror that I could read was translated Clive Barker, translated Peter Straub, and translated Stephen King. And so I think it was 11 when I read I think I read Pet Sematary back then. It was one of his darkest books, obviously, and it had a profound impact on me. And when King actually, read Hex and then tweeted about it, was just mind-boggling.
I can only imagine. Yeah, and I hesitate to compare because I don't think it's fair to it feels dismissive to say that. And I think
it's the obvious thing. I mean, everyone, when you write horror, people always say like that. It's what they say of John Ajvide Lindqvist in Sweden. Oh, he's the Swedish Stephen King. No, he's not John Lindqvist, but yeah.
Yeah, I read
associate with horror.
Right. And I think that's, people are looking for that. But what I don't know, what I've always liked about Stephen King is he's a great storyteller. I think a storyteller gets that across and then works with those elements and turns those dials and because somebody during my research before this interview talked about how it was sort of like a dark comedy as well, that Hex, where at one point they move the light post and she walks into the light post, and it's and the teens get so bold as to torture her essentially. So again, that victimization, she was sentenced to death in the 1600s, and the town is cursed by her, yes, but also is still tormenting her. She's still in chains. She can't get peace. It can't be peaceful for her.
No.
So all those things are at play, and I don't know. I just found it very relatable, and I like how the dials were turned.
I think that is because of the practicalities of it. I think if the way I tell stories is by just imagine I'm in that place and the situation is happening to me. What would I practically do? And what would I do if I was 16? And what would I do if I was 60? That's a difference, of course. And then I imagine that I'd live in a town that's cursed, and that as a kid, you're not allowed to go on socials and you're not allowed to speak about her. You get bored and you get, triggered by it. So yeah, of course, these kids are going to experiment with her and they're going to play tricks and put that lamppost in a way if she walks a certain route. That seemed like a very practical game people would play,
Right. So I would love, do I have to learn Dutch to read the first version of this? Because I love this, but because I like it so much, I'd want to read like that other version. Like I'm ready for it now. Would there ever be a one-to-one translation or no?
Maybe they will. Hasn't been done so far. I actually changed the ending as well, like the version you've read of Hex. The last, well, I won't spoil too much, but about the last 5 chapters go completely different in the original book. But why did I do that? Because rarely do you get the chance to make a book the best version of itself for a completely new audience.
Yeah.
And this time I had that chance because the book was out in the Netherlands for 3 years before it came out in America.
So you had all those reactions to think about.
Yeah. And actually, when I read it myself in translation in English and I edited the translation, I felt the original ending was off, and I could make it scarier by making it more subtle, because I went all out in the original. That was just like this Euronymous boss, hell on earth, Dante-esque kind of ending. But by making it more subtle, I think I made it more scary. And yeah, and if you have that chance, why not do it?
But yeah, yes. But what you're doing is you're making it so, like, you're creating this taboo with that first ending. Like, you're gonna have fans that are like, I need, because when you talk about crazy bonkers, and I know I'm not saying his name correctly, Hieronymus Bosch,
Pretty good.
ending, you're creating this craving. It's like this taboo sort of. But I always respect the author. The author says this is their preferred version. I think a lot of people want Stephen King to do a limited edition of his first version of The Stand. And he's like, nope, the uncut version is the preferred version. And I'm like, at that point, you got to respect the author. But I want crazier. Like, even though I did love this ending, and I didn't understand when I read it, because I started bumping up against reviews that said, oh, but this ending, and there was like a lot of, did you foresee that? Did you think there'd be a lot of back and forth over the translation?
No, that was one of the things that just happened that you don't, preconceive of. The journey this book has taken is a strange one, man. It's like, it came out in the Netherlands. It did decently well. It was sold to America first, actually, before it was sold to any other place. That was mind-boggling to me, because I expected it to be, maybe in German or French or something sooner than English. And then it just took off, and then it's still going. Hex is like, it's turning into this kind of ever seller. Also in the Netherlands, it's still on the shelves everywhere. It's still, and with every new book that I publish, Hex, starts flaring up again.
Right. So
I do have an interesting spoiler, maybe. Well, it's not a spoiler, not at all. But an interesting fact for readers who really enjoyed Hex. The guy who leads the control center, the Hex control, Robert Grimm, his name, right? Mm-hmm. I have a new book out in the Netherlands this year. It's called Oracle. That will be out in 2 years in the United States. And Robert Grimm returns in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so, he's back.
So post events in Hex, after the events in Hex? Okay.
Yes, it's not a sequel to Hex, not at all, but there will be references to it, of course, because he plays a major part in his new book.
That's really cool. That is super cool. I like that. So how do you feel about, right, you said, so every book you do now kicks up a little more interest in Hex, and that gets a little more press. How do you feel about being approached for a limited edition after all this time? Like, what was that like when Suntup reached out?
That was such an honor. I mean, I looked at their list of books that they publish, and I had no second of doubt in my mind. Okay, yeah, this is awesome. We're going to do this, because these editions are just so beautiful. And you have such a great list of books that you put out, and it's an honor to be on that same list. So there was no doubt in my mind.
I do know that a lot of fans, including myself, when Paul put out a survey of what books what books fans wanted to see, because he does, he picks books that are up to his standards, of course. but he gets a list, and he's always listening, very much like you. I mean, I think it is a great opportunity to hear your audience and make tweaks to a book that's already written is an amazing opportunity as an author, and I can see why you took it. But a lot of fans on every list, Hex would appear. It did, you know, it got to people. I was actually, a lot of people were surprised there wasn't already a limited edition of it in existence.
Yeah. No, yeah. I know it's been in the making for a while with Suntup now. But no, yeah, there wasn't before. No.
That surprises me, because it did have quite an impact. And there are some books that immediately get limited edition treatments. But so when you were approached by Paul or representatives at Suntup, did you suggest Chris for the artist?
Yes, I did. I think he suggested a couple different artists, and I was like, I know this one guy in the Netherlands. He had read the book. I didn't know him personally, but he'd read the book, and he sent me a penciled sketch of Catherine van Wyler, the witch, and that was awesome. It was beautiful, and in a strange way funny, because the sketch that he sent me looked creepily close, like Ellen Datlow, the horror editor from the United States. She's fantastic. But it created this image that really looked like her, but it was the witch. And I thought, man, this is fantastic. And then I started researching Chris's work, and his work is usually more uplifting and more positive in nature, but it has that feeling of estrangement to it, and a little bit of darkness to it. And I thought, well, I think he could do a fantastic job on this.
And
so I suggested him. Yeah.
And how did they receive that? Were they like totally open to it? Did they run with that idea, or did they resist it? Or
no, they were immediately, they jumped on it. And it's great if you think he fits the part. Sure, let's see how that works out. And yeah,
because when I knew that Suntup was doing this book and I didn't see the art, I visualized what I thought the art would be like, and it looked nothing like Chris's work. And then when I saw those pieces, it clicked for me. I'm like, this is perfect. It feels and I think the word he used was like fairy tale, and it is like a fairy tale. It is like a cautionary, because all fairy tales are cautionary tales.
Yeah.
and it just, I think it was a perfect balance to the story. And they are beautiful pieces. You've seen them, I'm sure.
Yes. No, they're absolutely splendid. And over the years, I've seen lots of artwork of people just make images of the witch or parts of the book. And what I love about that is, I love it when people take an idea that I created and let their own creativity loose on it. And I've seen artwork from the witch from China. I've seen artwork from the witch in Brazil, and all are very different. Everyone has their own image of what Catherine looks like, and they're all different. Some are old, some are young, some are horrific, some are very human, some are very creepy, and that's all okay. That's all fine.
Right.
The beauty of storytelling is, when I write a story, it's my story and I can do whatever I want with it. But when I publish it, it's yours, and your imagination, I need your imagination to finish the story, right? So
that is perfect. Yes.
I love that symbiosis between author and reader, and also between author and new creators that, create art inspired by that, or filmmakers, or, because it's something you do together. And it's fine if characters look different in your head than in mine, because that's how the imagination works.
That is absolute perfection. I couldn't agree more. I think that the best books are the ones that allow the reader the room to fill those spaces, to imagine and flesh out the world in their own colors and whatever they want. I think absolutely. The best books don't lay it all out for you as far as every single detail. It lets you fill those
Sure.
gaps. So I saw Hex was optioned. The rights were bought by Warner Brothers. Is that going to be a movie, a series, or is that stalled? Like, what's up with that?
So that's an interesting story. Warner Bros. Optioned the book very early on, I think in 2015 or so, or 14, even before the book came out, even in America. And they didn't do anything with it. So 2 years later, when in 2016, rights reverted back to us, 2 weeks later, Stephen King tweeted about the book. And ever since, people have been just swarming to us with, requests for the movie rights. It's been under the wings of Gary Dauberman for a long time. He's the guy who wrote the screenplay for Stephen King's It.
Okay.
The new movies. He also wrote Annabelle Comes Home, I think, a couple of these. He's now directing Salem's Lot, the new adaptation.
Wow.
And because it became such a hit, Gary's career like skyrocketed, and he was, pulled away from the project all the time to work on big movies. But because of the pandemic, he had some more time on his hands, so he actually developed the script for Hex for the pilot episode, because it's going to be a TV series. And this year, he's been shopping around with it. It's now it landed with a network. I think we're releasing the news for that in a couple of weeks or so, because the deal's now done.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very exciting. Yeah.
Are you a creative consultant at all? Are you still involved?
Yes, I am. I'm a consultant on the scripts. I think I will write a couple of episodes together with him as well.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I really look forward to it. Yeah.
So will that so more story will be added to this novel then? You're going, it's, so if it's a series, you can tell more of the stories of the townspeople, right?
Yeah, and I think the story lends itself very well for that, because the premise of this town being haunted by this witch who enters people's homes, but people are used to her, so they try to continue their daily lives. You can come up with endless variants of interesting stories that you can tell there.
No doubt. You can go back in time when before she was made, identified as a witch and persecuted. Did you see The Witch, that movie? Oh
yes, yeah, fantastic. Yeah,
I loved it. Totally different vibe, but
yeah.
But going back to those, I'm jazzed. I mean, it does lend itself to a lot in much the same way that Walking Dead, as a television series, it started with the horror of zombies. It started with this, oh man, you're going to get eaten if you go outside. And it evolved into zombies are something you have to plan around.
Yeah.
The real danger is the person, the people who have taken advantage of the apocalypse to victimize people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, in the end, almost all horror stories are metaphors for human evil and human fear, and that's where the real scares are.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I think Stephen King had a great quote, said something about the idea that real terror is when you discover the monsters aren't under your bed, but they're in us, or something like that. I butchered it, but the idea, yes, I think the scariest stuff I've ever read was true crime, because I think the stuff people do.
Oh, I'm fascinated by what brings normal people to do really dark things sometimes. Like a couple of years ago here in Europe, we had that plane crash of the Germanwings plane where the co-pilot, the co-pilot locked out his captain and then slowly let his plane descend towards the mountains because he wanted to commit suicide, but at the same time he took 150 people with him.
Right.
And I always imagine, so what brings a person who started out just like you and me to a moment in their lives that they make a decision to do this? And does that also mean that you and I could could be brought to the same decision, and that's a really scary thought.
It is. It is because that's the scariest thing. Is like you look like me. You're made up of the same stuff as I am.
Yeah.
And you took this path that I can't even conceive to tread.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
yeah.
I did want to talk a little bit about Echo. So you got a new book coming out as far as the translation.
Yeah.
Well, how would you classify how would you describe Echo?
So with Echo, I actually don't have the American edition here. I got the German edition, just came out a couple of weeks ago. Very big book.
Wow, it is big.
German is a very long language, but
yeah.
No, Echo is going to be a thrill ride, I think. I set out to write the creepiest opening to a book that I could think of. One day I woke up in my bedroom on an attic room, and I needed to go to the bathroom, which was down a very steep staircase. And I walked to the staircase, and I saw, in a flash, I imagined there were people in the staircase staring up at me. And I jumped and I ran back to bed, and then I jolted myself awake, and I was like, no, this didn't happen. Of course not, because I'm alone in the house and no one is there.
That rationality.
Yeah, exactly. And I put on all the lights and opened my laptop and put on a funny video on YouTube to, get my mind attached to the idea. Okay, real world, and I need to go down again. But I didn't. Okay, so what if I go back to the staircase, and what if these people are still there, and what if they've come a little bit closer this time?
Yeah.
And that's how Echo starts. It starts with a young woman who wakes up in a mountain chalet up in the Swiss Alps, American young woman, and she has these people in the staircase, and every time she doesn't look, they come a little bit closer.
Oh man.
And it's a very creepy opener. Echo is about Echo's a possession novel. The way Hex was my fresh twist on witchcraft, basically. With Echo, I wanted to write a possession novel like The Exorcist. But again, since I'm not raised religiously, I always felt like, why are possession stories always about religion? Possession can be so much wider than that. I am a mountaineer, and whenever I go climbing in the mountains, when I'm on a mountain, I always have that sense that these mountains have souls in them because they're so much bigger than we are, and we're awestruck when we're faced with them. And you sense that soul while you're on their flanks, and every mountain has a little bit of a different feeling than a different mountain. So I figured, wouldn't it be cool? This book is about a character who becomes possessed by the soul of a mountain. It's this force of nature that is raging inside of him, and it changes him and everything around him.
That is awesome. That sounds so cool. So basically possessed by a natural spirit, or
not even a spirit, by a force of nature itself.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. And that's in February. So February 2020.
With Thor Nightfire, yeah.
Nightfire. Yeah. When my wife was researching for this interview, she's like, "Do you ever hear Nightfire?" I never heard of Nightfire. So that's an imprint of Thor.
Yeah, it's a new imprint. I just launched it this fall. Some awesome books. Catriona Ward's The Last House on Needless Street is one of them.
Oh, okay. That book's been making a lot of buzz as well. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic storytelling. And they have a great new list of titles, and they have just re-released Hex as well as a paperback. And they are going to do just a general hardback of Echo, first release in the United States.
That's so cool. Well, I'm going to grab it. I grabbed this from PS. They had a bunch of signed editions, and cool. On a whim, I'm like, yeah, I'll get it. I gotta say, I don't think you had anything.
By the way, they're fantastic.
Yes, they are. And I saw they published one of your short stories that won an award.
Yeah, it was my first ever short story I ever published in English. The Boy Who Cast No Shadow. Pete Crowther from PS picked it up, and I was very grateful to that because that opened a lot of doors for me.
Yeah, no, he's a great guy. I love PS Publishing. Um, and so I picked this up. I don't agree with this marketing blurb here. Evil doesn't sleep, it waits. I don't
Yeah.
agree with that. To me, that gave a wrong impression. Um, but once I
Still
read
good though.
it, I know you probably don't have any say in that, but
Back then, no.
so have you seen the design and everything for the Suntup edition? Were you able to weigh in on any of it, or?
I've seen I've seen very little as of yet. I've seen a little
Oh,
bit. Like I know the lettered edition has like peacock feathers laid
in the end papers.
Yeah. But I have seen very little of the rest. I know they're stitching in it, which is awesome because I always felt this book needs a stitched edition, of course.
Right,
Uh,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I cannot wait. I was thrilled when I saw that it was on the deck to be published. I'm so looking forward to it.
me
And
too.
I'm looking forward to Echo too. As I was thinking about this, I'm like, why have I not read more from you? Because when you read a book and you connect with it, it can be hit or miss. Every relationship's different. It doesn't make a
Sure.
book not good if I don't like it. It just means that book wasn't for me. But when
Yeah.
you find one that is for you and you're written by an author that like spoke to you, you want to seek out more. And so I'm very happy there are more English translations in the work. And you said Oracle is going to be another one in a few years.
Yep. Yeah, that comes out a year after Echo. Um, so a year and a half from now, I guess. The thing is, of course, I always have to deal with translation, and that's a long process. And I think I had 3 stories published in English before Hex was published. All 3 stories got nominated for awards. One actually won the Hugo Award, which was again mind-boggling. But when Hex came and it took off the way it did, it kind of froze me creatively for a while because no one really prepares you for the pitfalls of a success like that, because
Wow.
everyone loved that book, like Stephen King's tweet. I mean, The Guardian, the Wall Street Journal, all fantastic reviews of Hex. And in my own country, it took off then. And then, like I said, I'm a mountaineer, like the characters in Echo. And whenever I climb a mountain, that mountain is magical and it's in your mind and it blows up to this larger than life thing and this goal very far away. But once you reach a summit, you see a bigger mountain in the distance, and that's more challenging or more interesting or more difficult to climb. And that's where the magic is then. And for me, after Hex, the challenge was always, okay, how I'm going to do so, how I'm going to write something that's not repetitive, that's not a
Right.
Hex 2.0, if you will. That's something
Right.
really new. I wanted to reinvent myself that way. So it took me a while to actually finish Echo. And it was actually when I was touring in the United States in 2016, when the book initially came out. I visited George Martin in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I asked him the same question: how do you deal with that pressure? Because, of course, Game of Thrones launched him, and he was already, well-known author before that. But that pressure is, of course, why he hasn't finished those books,
Yep.
this year as well. And he said the only thing you can do is go back all the way to the beginning when you started out writing, just you in your attic room and your story, and have fun at it. That's what he said.
Wow.
And to hear him say that moved something in me. Okay, yeah, I got to go back to me and my story and forget about the readers, whether they're 100 or 1,000 or 100,000 or a million. It's just me and the story, and have fun at it. And I never had so much fun writing a story than with Echo. So
That's awesome. I love hearing that. And when you do the translations, I mean, obviously you're completely fluent in English. There's no issue. So what is that like? You have somebody else translate for you?
yeah, So I studied English. I read a lot in English. I studied American literature, but I don't feel comfortable translating my own work
Huh.
because, I mean, I wrote a short story once in English. It's called "You Know How the Story Goes." It's up on Tor.com. You can read it. It's a horror story, but that's the only time that I actually wrote in English. I feel more comfortable writing in my native tongue because you're just more free that way.
Right.
So Nancy Forrest Fleer translated Hex, and Mosh Jalula translated Echo. They're both fantastic. But what I do is I edit the translation. So I alter things. I put it in my own voice because I'm comfortable enough to do that. But I need that basis to work with, basically.
That's interesting. It's have you ever come across a translation and actually thought, oh wow, that's maybe a little better than I thought I could do in English or something? Or
All the time, definitely.
yeah.
I mean, I admire the work that both Nancy and Marsh have done for me, and also Leah Bell, who translated the story that won the Hugo Award. She's very good as well. I mean, I could not do what they do, so that's fantastic. I am stubborn enough that I then start changing stuff because I want to put my own voice in and all that, and it's a fun process for me to do that. Also because from English, these books get translated into a lot of different languages. And so I want the English version of the book to be exactly where I want it to be.
Interesting. So they don't translate from Dutch to Chinese or Japanese or German or
No, it's much more expensive to do that because, I mean, everybody in the world speaks English. There are just very few people speak Dutch. So it's way easier to find an English translator to other countries, basically.
Interesting. Yeah, that's one thing. My wife and I were talking about how in America, you know, we speak one language basically, and we don't, you know, there's no real second language. I mean, we are a country of many languages, but and it does flavor English. I do love the way it does that, but yes. So, you know, I stumble over names. I think Chris laughed a couple of times at my pronunciations. Like when I said Hieronymus Bosch, he's like, And I realized I didn't say it the way he would say it.
On that note, how did you pronounce my name?
I was, he kind of smirked when I said it, but I said Thomas and Thomas Olde Heuvelt, and he's like, Thomas Olde Heuvelt or something. I don't know.
Very close, very close. I mean, Thomas, it's just, you can pronounce the name exact, just whatever you prefer. In Dutch, we say Thomas, but Thomas is fine. The last name is Olde Heuvelt. That's the whole thing.
Olde
Heuvelt is a double last name.
Okay.
It's Old Dutch dialect. It means old hill. But when I consider a pseudonym, there's already a horror writer in America named Hill, and I'm actually younger than him, so go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Olde Heuvelt.
Olde Heuvelt. Okay.
Good, very good.
I try. I mean, I have to have you say it, and then I say it every single time. Or I'll just take a slice of this recording, and every time I'm going to say your name, I'll just play you saying your name. And that's so I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. If you have any desire to go on Facebook and see the fans' reaction, I can let you in, and you could be there, because usually when it releases, everybody goes crazy and they talk about the book, and it's a lot of fun.
I'm happy to go there and answer some questions. If readers want to ask some questions in the comments or so, then I'm happy to answer some.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'll connect with you after this and send you the link and all that. And if you want to get in, I'll let you in if that's cool. So until then, I'm really looking forward to Hex the series, knowing that you're involved with it, because I don't like mixing my media. I don't like taking a book to a movie because so much falls off. But knowing a TV series is usually a better way, and I think we have such great technology now that we're not
Oh,
losing those special effects that were used to be reserved for movies.
yeah.
Now we have, yeah.
Mhm.
So knowing you're involved makes me feel good. And then of course, Echo. I'm very excited for that. And Thursday, actually, when everybody sees it, it'll be today, the release of this book. I can't wait to reread it with Chris's art and then learn Dutch so I could read the original.
Nice. Good luck with that.
Yeah. So I appreciate it. Thank you again. And all the success, man. I'm always love talking to the creators of these works and having my mind blown.
I appreciate you bringing out this really awesome edition of the book, and I can't wait to have it in my own hands.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll take care, Tomas. And I'll see you around.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Bye.